So I've got a question for all people out there, especially those of us in the English-speaking world who, over the last 3 years, really since 2022, but going even as far back as 2016, we have been embroiled in a controversy around transgender people. Right? So transgender people include trans women. That is where somebody who was assigned male at birth had the various, things that we associate with being male, and transitioned to assigning as female, either as outward appearance or even going as far as to have, physical modifications. But the situation is you started off male, you transition to considering yourself female. Then we also have trans men, where the person starts off at birth being assigned female with the female, machinery involved, and decides that they transition to male. So you go female to male and male to female. MTF, male to female. FTM, female to male. Right? That's the two basic categories, but of course, everybody knows there's probably more gray area than that. But I'm going to focus on this very black and white idea of how society, and all of its rage over the last several years, has only focused on one of those two sides. And this is a question that I just really think is critical to this entire debate. And it's really critical into determining if this whole entire situation is in good faith or not. So yesterday, the President of the United States puts an executive order that's out that says, the title of it is Keeping Men Out of Women's Sports. Wow, right? And of course, if you have a pulse or a temperature in the United States of America, you've heard this saying before. I mean, this has been at the forefront of our collective rage for the last 3 years. I mean, there's some theories that this is even something that swayed the presidential election. I don't know how far of a truth that is, but the reality of it, this is a major political issue in the United States. And if we read the text of this executive order, what we find is that the concept of transgender has been completely erased from the text of this. Instead, it has been replaced with the notion that men are participating in women's activities and entering women's spaces. So the concept of transgender has been completely eliminated. And we see that in all of the conservative commentary around transgender people. They constantly just call them he or call them men. And I'm talking about MTF individuals, trans women, or started off male, went to female. Okay, all of this stuff over the last several years, everything from drag queens to Sarah McBride, who was the first transgender person elected to Congress, to this sports nonsense that's been going on, where there's like 10 people in the entire United States that this applies to, and it's become a national controversy. It's completely focused on male to female. Why did President Trump not just write an executive order saying keeping transgender people out of sports, or keeping sports associated with the gender assigned at birth, or some kind of generic, more basic language to describe the mechanics of what is happening here? Because the situation is people are anxious of the idea that they'll have a female child or athlete on a sports team, and there could be somebody there who was assigned male at birth. That's the big anxiety that's playing into people's minds with this issue. All right. Why did you have to write it in this way versus just saying keeping sports to biological sex or something like that, right? This is the question that I've been asking for years now. We are obsessed, absolutely obsessed with worrying about MTFs. Meanwhile, over here, we have FTMs. What's an FTM? Female to male, aka a trans man. Do they play sports? Do they play sports on men's teams? Yes, they do. Why is nobody freaking the hell out about this? I mean, we have this person right here, Chris Mosier. He's an Olympic swimmer. FTM. Did we hear anything in August in the Paris Olympics of anybody freaking out about the idea of a biological female participating on male sports teams? Did we hear anybody complain about that? Did we hear any politician get on Twitter and get on social media and start a flame war about this topic? No, we didn't. The only thing we heard about was people complaining about the idea of MTFs, male to female, participating on female designated sports teams. We only worry about the directionality of male going to female. We don't give a shit about the directionality of female flowing to male. That might as well not exist in the social conversation. It certainly doesn't exist in President Trump's executive order. The title says everything you need to know. This tells me a lot about the conversation about transgender people. This isn't. This seems like something that goes much deeper than just the anxiety of changing the idea of sex and gender. This seems like it flows a lot farther than just this notion of you're bending something that I thought was indelible, that was fixed, that could never change, right? And I don't have all the answers to that, but I have my theories on why we are so worried about MTFs and we don't give a rat's ass about FTMs. Like, they're almost invisible. But they exist. Okay, here we go. This guy right here, Stephen Whittle, FTM. If he walked into a men's restroom, do you think anybody would call the cops and say that there's a rapist in the men's restroom? Probably not. I think most of us would say if you just walked into a McDonald's restroom and this person was in there, I don't think anything would happen. So the situation is very interesting. This person here, that Aiden Dowling, FTM, trans man. This tells me a lot about our anxieties around this topic. A lot of it probably has to do with the fact that these trans men, at least the ones I'm showing you here, are very easily passing as male human beings. I mean, what about, if a female human being changes their hairstyle and they change their clothing, what is it about their body that really tells us that they might be biological female? I mean, the obvious, but other than that, if that's not there, then this guy walks into a men's room at Walmart and I go in there, I'm not gonna think twice, right? And even if I know that they are a trans man, I do not care. I'm not bothered by it whatsoever. I also say that I'm not bothered by male to female or trans women using women's facilities. I don't care about that, but I can't speak for all of the females out in the world because that's not me. But they are definitely anxious about it. It's very interesting. We had the situation back in November where the election happened and the first transgender congressperson was elected, Sarah McBride, which is a MTF situation, male to female. And let's just see the response from one of her co-workers, who is also female, biological female. It's, never transgender or anything like that. It's plain old woman, as we all know. How did they respond to the possibility of having to share a restroom with a MTF individual? Let's just hear.
Well, number one, I want to see this in the House rules package. I want to make sure that no men are in women's private spaces, and it's not going to end here. This shouldn't be going on any federal property. If you're a school or an institution that gets government funding, this kind of thing should be banned. I think it's sick, it's twisted. I have fought like hell for women's rights. 25 years ago this year, I became the first woman to break the glass ceiling and graduate from a military college that was formerly all male. And to see the way that I've been attacked today and last night for fighting to protect women and girls, it's ridiculous. So if that being a feminist makes me an extremist, I'm totally here for it.
Is this effort in response to Congresswoman McBride coming to Congress?
Yes, and absolutely, and then some.
So, what does that tell me about this situation? It feels like this goes far beyond just the idea of a person identifying with a different gender. She is telling us how it has insulted her belief in women's rights, how it is sick or twisted, or and she's basically going on to say how she was able to break the glass ceiling, that classic saying of women being able to achieve things that they couldn't before because society basically told them they weren't allowed to. It sounds like some people are taking this as a assault on the rights of women. And I have a really hard time understanding where that feeling is coming from. I just don't see how that, because if I'm a male and decide to transition to female, is it because the fact of the matter is that if we believe in society that women have higher challenges than men, which appears to be what Nancy Mace was saying right there, then that would imply that an MTF individual, a trans woman, is effectively moving to a lower status position in society voluntarily. Because they started off male, and if we assume that, from a feminist perspective, that men have privilege, and they move to basically being female, that they're throwing away that privilege, which is going to make it harder on that individual. So there's some kind of a psychological machination going on here in the minds of feminist individuals around this topic of male to female. I haven't heard any TERFs, trans exclusionary radical feminists, that's a mouthful, right? Haven't heard any of them bring anything up about people like this, FTMs. This is dipping really deep into the human being's consciousness around what gender means and what it represents in society, and the symbols and the power and the rights that are associated with it. This is something that is quite a topic, and I don't have the authority to really go any further on it. But I observe an absolute fascination with trans women in society. All of our politicians who are creating these laws, creating these regulations to fight against the advancement of trans people is completely focused on trans women. Trans men are nobody cares, right? Nobody said anything about them. Nobody wrote an executive order to ban them from sports or to ban them from bathrooms nobody ran around the halls of Congress like Nancy Mace hanging up signs over restrooms telling them that women are not allowed in men's restrooms. Like if I was a politician and I said this is a woman, what kind of response would I get? If I was a politician and I said this is a woman, like President Trump is doing in the other direction, what kind of response would I get? I really want to know that. So there's something weird going on here. Something that can probably be explained by somebody who has more knowledge of human psychology than myself. A person with more expertise can understand, but this is my observation. And it is the thing that pisses me off every single time I hear about somebody fighting about transgender issues is why do we care so much about trans women and we don't say a damn word about trans men? There's some kind of a double standard happening here. And that's basically it.